Today's book review is entitled Wildwood Wisdom by Ellsworth Jaeger. This book was first published in 1945 by the Macmillan Company and reprinted in 1992 by First Shelter Printing. Ellsworth Jaeger was a faculty member of the Buffalo Museum of Science and an authority on American Indian folklore and camping. Jaeger spent many summers in the outdoors leading woodcraft groups across the country. Ellsworth Jaeger wrote Wildwood Wisdom during the latter portion of World War II, when a lot of people were filled with fear and confusion of the uncertain times ahead. The book is filled with educational information about survival techniques and methods that were used around the turn of the century. Wildwood Wisdom is considered somewhat of a nostalgic book on the subject of early American exploration and Indian folklore. Anyone who would like an educational read on early American woodsmanship, this book is mainly intended for camping enthusiasts. It's written in a simple format with simple illustrations that's easy to understand for anyone, even kids. The book starts out with an introduction that's written by Lloyd Kahn in April of 1992, where he describes his perspective on the author Ellsworth Jaeger. The book consists of a contents section and an illustration section. The book consists of a contents section and an illustration section. The back of the book includes a detailed index. There is some predictability with the structure of each chapter. The author tries to give a thorough description of each topic, including how to safely and properly use it, as well as a description of any additional equipment required and the proper use of that as well. Each of the chapters vary in length, but range from 25 pages to 75 pages depending on the discussion of a particular topic. Survival is a large part mental and a small part methodology and gear. Even in a book that's 65 years old, the author attempts to make sure that the reader gets a psychological pep talk and remains calm and cool during times of crisis. For example, in the chapter on being lost and using a compass, the author starts out by stating that you are not lost, but rather your camp or destination is lost, and not to panic. This is great advice to include in any camping or survival book. The book gives great instruction and advice on topics that haven't been covered in many years. For example, how to find directions through natural means without a compass, what is a wigwam and how to build one, how to build a teepee, constructing snowshoes and tools from natural resources, how to make a rabbit-skinned blanket, cordage, cooking recipes and hobo living techniques, how to kill and butcher small and large game. There is a whole chapter on bark craft, 25 pages of what you can do out of different types of tree bark. The list goes on. A lot of great information in this book. Some of the illustrations and instructions deal with topics that are more of a novelty value than to that related to survival or camping. For example, the history of the 10-gallon cowboy hat, decorating and painting your camp furniture, or how to make designs on leather products. Some of the illustrations aren't detailed enough or drawn with enough accuracy to be of use in a potentially dangerous situation. For example, there are many instances in the book where illustrations are used to show poisonous plants, snakes, edible leaves, insects, etc. But the drawings aren't detailed enough to really give the reader a positive identification of these items and objects, leaving the reader needing to obtain supplemental reading materials for these items. Wildwood Wisdom relies heavily on illustrations to show the reader how to build and construct certain objects. But the construction of the book and the paper don't really allow for much variation in environments, because the book isn't weatherproof. Although it's a great bookshelf reference, it isn't advised that the book be carried in your backpack or out camping due to its frail construction. There are a lot of forgotten techniques and methods of surviving that aren't taught much anymore. This book contains a lot of those ideas and techniques that today are highly dependent upon modern survival gear that was not available around the turn of the century. Although some of the illustrations are elementary and not very detailed in some cases, they still do provide the reader with a good basis for primitive construction techniques, and it's a good primer for any beginning outdoor adventurer. It might remind some readers of older versions of the Boy Scout Handbook. Wildwood Wisdom gives the reader the confidence of being able to survive, even if you don't have a lot of fancy gear on hand. This book teaches philosophies from a time when outdoorsmen had to rely upon their skill and ingenuity to survive rather than what's in their pocket survival kit. Woodcraft and Camping by George Sears Nesmuk, published by Dover Publications in 1963. The Field and Forest Handybook by Daniel Carter Beard, published by David Godine in 2000. Or any of the early editions of the Boy Scout Handbook. Wildwood Wisdom sells at many online book retailers for about $15. For a long time this book was out of print, but recently is being reprinted and is widely available. Wildwood Wisdom received 4 solid stars. It's an enjoyable read with a lot of memorable discussions and a rebirth of some forgotten content. Although some areas were lightly researched, there were still some convincing arguments discussed. This is a noteworthy read, even if some information is of novelty value. This book is recommended. Check it out. Thanks for watching the Survival Bookshelf, and stay tuned for more.